Hello, everyone, and welcome to angelMD's Syndicate presentation for Articulus Bio. On the line with us today, we have our Syndicate leaders, Dr. Tom Eichmann, Dr. Dan Osell, and Mark Mescher, as well as Adam Rubenstein, CEO of Articulus Bio. Articulus Bio takes a novel approach to wear debris in joints. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Tom Eichmann, who will give you a little bit of background on himself, the space, and Articulus Bio.
Hi, this is Tom Eichmann. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I've been doing knee and hip replacement for just over 12 years after doing a fellowship at the Anderson Clinic. And knee and hip replacements have been doing very, very well for years and have had very good outcomes. Unfortunately, that good outcome hasn't been the case with some other joints. Ankle replacement in particular has not been as successful. There's other joints in the wrist and shoulder and other areas that are much more in their infancy than knee and hip replacement. And we have Dan Osell with us today to talk to us a little bit about some of the problems in the ankle replacements that are currently on the market.
So hello, everyone. This is Dan Osell. I'm a foot and ankle specialist, fellowship trained. And Tom is exactly correct. Not only have ankle replacements been available to us for over the past 35 years. The problem with why people don't know about them that well is because many of the early models were failures, and so it didn't really get off the ground, such as knee and hip replacement. And interestingly enough, over the last 10 years, ankle replacement has become much more into vogue, but it's a completely different patient population. So the typical hip and knee patient is I won't say always an older patient, but typically it's primary osteoarthritis, which everyone knows, and mom and dad get their hip replaced and they're doing great. The difference in this population and why this product is actually quite revolutionary is that the majority of our ankle arthritic patients are post-traumatic in nature. They're young people who have gotten in car accidents or fractured their ankles out here in Colorado, hiking, biking, walking, falling, doing sporting activities, typically happening younger in life. So we have a much younger population that we're dealing with regards to ankle arthritis, which leads itself to significant concern about polyethylene failure, which is what we will be talking about later, and why this unique entity, Articulus Bio, is so interesting to us. Because if we can limit polyethylene wear, which causes failure of the components, we feel much more confident in giving these patients pain-free lifestyles that they can return to at a younger age, because we don't necessarily have as significant fear. It is incredibly important, because if we don't necessarily have capabilities of revising ankles at this point in time, that's coming to the forefront. But again, I think that this product is revolutionary with the decreased risk of polyethylene wear, which Jerome's going to talk about soon here, which makes this very intriguing and very exciting product.
Thank you, Dr. Osell and Eichmann. I am Adam Rubenstein. I am pleased to be here today. I thank you for your interest and your time. We'd like to talk to you a little bit more about Articulus Bio and get through our standard safe harbor statement. We have managed to assemble a very sophisticated group of clinical advisors, and we are honored to have them on board and supporting us. Just to present a quick quote from one of our clinical and scientific advisors, Dr. Ted Parks, who highlights that our ability to improve efficacy on our technology would have the effect of potentially reshaping the way joint replacements are done. We think that's a profound statement, and we are excited to present our technology to you. I will present a bit of an introduction around the space, and then as we pivot to the technology, I will hand the microphone off to Jerome Rifkin, our very talented Chief Technology Officer and biomechanical engineer. So we will discuss our next generation Articulus biotendinoid web joint system, and most importantly are the concepts of, number one, Articulus Bio is platform in nature. We have a technology that could extend to a variety of total joints. We leverage some common materials, yet in a unique way, and that's around ultra-high molecular polyethylene, or UMPI. And as Dan Osell mentioned, that it is a cause of tremendous distress within the current state of total joints. We'll touch on our manufacturing process, which incorporates a personalized medicine approach and a 3D print manufacturing process. And our mission is to abate revisions, extend implant longevity, and create a lifetime joint. So our intellectual property strategy is broad in nature. Our white picket fence is designed to enable us to wrap our arms around the total joint replacement space, and through such parent intellectual property, then carve out additional follow-on patents that address each of the individual joints. So as we heard from Drs. Eichmann and Osell, that failing joints are quite considerable in many respects, and that across the joint spectrum, in summation, there are upwards of 500,000 revision procedures that are forecasted by year 2025. And the primary causes of these high failure rates are the wear particle generation caused by the UMPI, the aseptic radiographic loosening, bone subsidence, as well as high bone implant stress concentrations and some implant malpositioning. So our solution, how we overcome the most common causes of these variety of failures, is a approach to each one of them. In terms of wear particle generation, our tendinoid web joint system will reduce, if not eliminate, the friction that transpires at articulating joint faces. And by reducing or eliminating that friction, we believe that that will reduce or eliminate the amount of wear particles. In terms of aseptic radiographic loosening, we have an ability to improve the bond between the implant and bone through personalized 3D geometries that are personalized, that reduces, helps contribute to the reduction in bone loss and improving the bonds, as well as the challenge of bone subsidence. And that is where the component of the joint implant is sinking or settling into the bone. And again, we address this through our surfacing techniques, improving, again, the implant bone integrity. So though we're a platform in nature, we have elected to begin with the ankle device as our first product. Primarily because the market has been slow to develop and is currently performing below its potential, and the ankle presents the highest failure rates and revision requirements across all total joint replacements. We believe that there is an opportunity to materially expand the total addressable market for our Articulus total ankle replacement joint, and we will discuss a little further in detail how the growing of the aging population, obese population, and the accelerating incidence of ankle osteoarthritis can be addressed to create greater opportunity than the total number of procedures that we're seeing in the ankle today. So with that brief introduction, I'd like to now pass it off to our Chief Technology Officer, Jerome Rifkin, to discuss the Articulus tendinoid web joint system.
Thank you, Adam. So the tendinoid web joint system is very different. As Dr. Eichmann once compared it to, it is the suspension bridge that replaced normal bridges in our traffic system. It can carry higher loads for longer amounts of times and span greater distances. And those expanded weight-bearing and lifetime capacities are what we bring here with our suspended tendinoid web joint system. As you'll see in the upcoming slides, it relies upon a completely different design paradigm. Instead of having sliding and grinding as the primary movement operations, we have wrapping and unwrapping of a flexible tendinoid around smooth metal surfaces. That should be completely eliminating, if not, should be completely eliminating sliding and grinding, and therefore eliminating debris generation. And that debris generation is critical, as it is what causes bone degradation, among other things. The total ankle replacement carries the weight by floating on the web joint, as you'll see, and the web joint is composed of the same material currently used. The ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene cords are just the same material as the current plastic bearing that's in the ankle today. We're using it in a tension fashion, unlike in a compressive fashion that's currently used. The revision capability of the joint is still intact. Currently, minor revisions are done by replacing that ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene disc or bearing. We would be replacing the cassette of the joint, which you will see in coming slides. The tendinoid web joint works by wrapping and unwrapping, as I said, delivering well-controlled three-dimensional movement and restoring the patient's full range of motion so that they can return to their activities of daily life. So here we have a picture of the entire cassette mounted on its mounting plates in the context of the bony geometry here. So you can see point one is the cassette, the tibial socket, the talar tower, and the tendinoid web all assembled. Point two here is pointing out the personalized 3D geometry that we would minimize bone loss and maximize metal bone engagement by custom designing and printing the mounting plates to match the patient's anatomy. And you can see that as well on point three, the surfacing technique, minimizing bone loss and maximizing contact. So here we have pictures of just the base plates. On the left, we have the talar base plate awaiting installation of the cassette, and on the right, the tibial base plate. The talar base plate is made from 3D printed cobalt chromium steel. Same material is currently used in that location in current total ankle replacements. And the tibial base plate is made from Ti-6-4. Again, the same material currently used, just these geometries are custom printed to the patient, allowing us to maximize the patient's bone and metal contact, thereby minimizing the stress as loads are passed from bone into metal and from metal into bone. Thereby we can decrease the stress concentrations at the bone, decrease bone subsidence, and increase joint longevity. Here's a multiple view look at the tibial component. It's also designed to provide just a tiny little bit of flex in case of shock loading. This is a view, an expanded view of the talar component. These components, these wafers here clamp onto the tendinoid. So the tendinoid actually cannot slide relative to these surfaces, nor relative to the surface of the tibial socket. So we've eliminated the grinding that is normally seen in these joints. Here we have a cutaway view mediolaterally showing how the tendinoid wraps around and through these various components. You can see there's a difference between the left side and the right side of the joint that differentially restricts the range of motion, as is done with the normal human ankle. So we can recreate the complex range of motion of the human ankle by using tensile-based geometry. And it's important to note just how flexible these tendinoids are. They're easily bending over 1 times their own diameter for millions of cycles in practice. The strength of the tendinoids shown here is a 1.5 millimeter cord that has a breaking strength of over 450 pounds. It's truly a technology that's enabling a quantum leap in our ability to design better joints. Here we have a view from above with the tibial tower made translucent, and you can see that the web that's created is held up from below by the tibial component, held up from below by the talar component, and the tibial component is resting on that web. So really the crisscross web of tendinoids is floating the tibial component above the talar component. All the movement in dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, inversion, eversion is just wrapping around surfaces and unwrapping around surfaces. So we're free of friction, and if we're free of friction, we're free of abrasion. If we're free from abrasion, we're not creating the micro debris that is toxic to the bone. And so we will last for longer. Here we have a standard of care total ankle joint on the left. You can see how we have a domed metal surface in the talar region, and it's mated to a polyethylene bearing surface, and it really is sliding and grinding on every step. Now this is incredibly tough plastic, and it does last for millions of cycles, and 1 million steps is a year of a person's life. So if we're trying to last for decades, we can't be grinding away on this plastic bearing and poisoning the bone and expecting that things will be okay. That's why we're proposing a completely different paradigm solution for how to make joints that last. You can see there's a marked difference between what has been done in the past and what we're proposing the future looks like. These dark gray tendinoids here, as I said, are very flexible and very strong. So our defensible competitive advantage is that we are eliminating the failure modes that have been identified in the current total ankle. We're eliminating wear particle generation. We are improving the current multi-axiality of total ankle replacements to bring it up to the standard of true human joint normal. We're minimizing bone loss and maximizing anatomical contact. We're minimizing blood supply disruption and diminishing talar and tibial subsidence. By using custom printed geometry, we're reducing contact surface stress, and by using custom printed surgical tooling, we're improving the surgical technique available to orthopedic surgeons today. Adam, back to you.
Thank you, Jerome. That's great. As indicated earlier, this is a material market size that we're playing in, and we're excited about the opportunity that the total addressable market presents. Here's a quick look at survival rates of second and third generation ankle implants with time across the x-axis. We know that our opportunity here is substantial in terms of the focus on creating a lifetime joint. Some of the performances of these ankle products, such as the STAR, which is the red line extending out to 15 years, demonstrating a failure rate. So Articulus is creating our first, the market's first fourth generation ankle implant based upon our novel technology. So what are we trying to achieve with this financing? Few elements are focused on the product in terms of getting through a testing of all of the sub-assembly components of our design and getting the product printed from at our partner 3D Systems, who will be our manufacturing partner. We intend to derive our regulatory pathway and have some fantastic support on that front. The critical element here is, will we be a 510K or a PMA registration as determined by FDA? Some of our regulatory support has highlighted that the fact that we are using cobalt chrome, Ti-64, and UMPI, which are all materials that have been previously approved by FDA and are all biocompatible materials. And so we are quite optimistic that our path will be illuminated down the 510K tributary. And finally, in terms of our general and administrative efforts, we are allocating a lot of time and assets towards further advancing our intellectual property portfolio and continuing to work on the business development side in terms of partnerships with our potential suppliers, testers, and manufacturers. And we are at least seasoned enough in terms of entrepreneurship to understand the capital X requirements to move a medical device along. And as we are achieving our seed stage based milestones, as data comes into the office, we will begin to work on our Series A equity round. Some of our partners on the council side, the regulatory side, manufacturing, and some early stage testing opportunities. The team, again, is exceptional, starting with our clinical and scientific advisory board members, such as Drs. Osel and Eichmann, as well as Parks, who was mentioned earlier, and Kevin Nagamani, another foot and ankle expert. Jerome has been a serial entrepreneur, having spent about 10 years prior to this working on a company called Fit Bionic, where they raised venture capital and NIH non-dilutive funding to develop a prosthetic foot that improved the walking efficiency for amputees versus the standard of care carbon fiber feet. Patrick Wheeler has been a 20-year plus C-suite finance veteran who has raised hundreds of millions of dollars in every way possible, CFOing both private and public technology companies. And myself, prior to taking on the role at Articulus, I had founded a software company called Covalent Data, where we built a academic industry technology partnering platform that was recently acquired by Chicago-based Wellspring, and allowed the opportunity to connect with Jerome and the rest of the fantastic team to engage in this opportunity. So in terms of our financing, we are raising a convertible preferred note offering a substantial discount of 30% and a 6% yield with a $10 million cap. We're targeting a $500,000 raise, and we believe that will create a material step up in value of the entity throughout the period of the note by advancing the prototype to a format ready for printing, by determining our tooling and surgical designs, receiving clarity from FDA via Q-Sub meeting on our roadmap. We will complete our non-clinical development partnerships, expand our IP portfolio, and begin to prepare for our equity financing. So just a reminder before we get to a couple of questions. The most important concept to take home is that Articulus Bio is a platform-based technology applicable to many different joints. Our low-hanging fruit, our beachhead, is the total ankle replacement joint, and that our technology there may reduce or eliminate the wear particle generation, combat aseptic loosening, overcome the bone subsidence challenge, and the implant bone stress concentrations and malpositioning challenges that are often faced. With that said, we can pivot to some questions now, and certainly we are eager to hear your questions. Please email them to Mark Mesher, that's Mark at angelMD.co. And that said, let's get into some questions.
This is Tom Eichmann. Jerome, I remember when I first saw this design, some of the questions I had were, is the range of motion going to be adequate with this type of design? And I know you've made some different improvements on that. What do you estimate the range of motion of the total ankle replacement design to be with this technology?
It's a good question. At the time when we met, it was not equal to the normal human ankle joint anatomy. And with Dr. Osell highlighting the population that could receive and benefit from this technology, and you're stressing the need to return these people back to a full state of athleticism that they were used to, we've revisited the design and improved on the ranges of motion so that they are now normal human average ranges of motion. So that's 40 degrees of plantar flexion, 20 degrees of dorsiflexion, between 5 and 15 degrees of eversion, and 25 to 30 degrees of inversion. And these are tunable within that range. So those are currently designed maxima. But if you have somebody who needs more stability and less mobility, then we can also design to that. Naturally, we all prefer that the patients get that stability from their own musculature, and we're just replacing their skeletal system. But if we need to help them with additional stability, we can further restrict ranges of motion.
I thought you did an excellent job during the presentation of really presenting a case why wear would be improved with your technology compared to the existing technology, which is great, because that's one of the main failure mechanisms that we see in joint replacement. One of the other failure mechanisms we see in, say, knee and hip replacement more that might come up as a question is the possibility of instability. So when you look at your design and it's combating instability versus a classic sort of a round surface with sort of a cup surface on top of it, how do you think your design is going to hold up, you know, with instability stresses for this?
Another good question. We are inherently stable in a neutral standing configuration. The tibial socket component goes around the talar tower, and it actually, where the cord goes, it actually sits lower on the tibial component than it does on the talar component. So we're at the bottom of a gravity well, so we are actually more stable than the natural human anatomy, and certainly more stable than current total ankle joint replacement, which is basically standing on the top of a hill waiting to roll down. So I think that the current designs on the market benefit from their friction to help create some stability of standing on the top of that hill, whereas we're eliminating the friction but having improvements of stability from being at the bottom of a gravity well.
So Jerome, that's awesome, and I just wanted to piggyback on that because at the end of the day, some of the listeners out there, even physicians are out there, they're saying, okay, they've got cobalt chrome and they've got polyethylene, and they're telling us that polyethylene wear is a substantial cause of failure in other joint replacements. So I think it's really imperative for them to really understand. I think you did a great job, Jerome, describing that. But do you think that the degrees of range of motion that is going to be allowed in this ankle, which is incredibly important in my humblest opinion, plus the way that you talk about the folding and the unfolding, again, I think it's imperative for those out there to understand polyethylene wear, that yes, this is we're comparing UMPI to UMPI, but the way that we're using UMPI is completely different and revolutionary than it is in current ankle replacements, and for that matter, shoulder, hip, knee replacements for that matter. That is the principal thing to understand here, because that's what's going to revolutionize ankle replacement.
Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate you saying that. It's absolutely right. We're operating in a tensile mode and allowing motion through wrapping and unwrapping, rather than encouraging patients to grind a piece of steel onto a piece of plastic and hoping that that plastic lasts. So by designing out the friction, by designing out the abrasion, we're creating something that can truly be a lifetime joint.
Because again, I want people to understand that it's not what causes the everybody says that it's the polyethylene that causes the problem. The issue that happens, and Tom, you can tell me if I'm wrong with regard to this, is that what happens with this friction, and it creates these polyethylene particles. And what happens is there's cells inside your body called macrophages that engulf these polyethylene particles, creating an inflammatory response, which basically erodes the bone and causes what we call aseptic loosening. These cobalt chromium implants become loose. So if we can eliminate that particle wear and that activation of the macrophages, which then causes erosion of the bone, that's what causes this continued and hopefully lifetime stability of these implants. The other thing that I wanted to ask you, Jerome, is that in my humblest opinion, I think that no joint replacement demands precision like an ankle replacement. It demands the same ligamentous balancing issues of knees as well as hips, and then bone situations with regards to shoulders. So can you explain to me current state of the art with regards to looking at x-rays and kind of gauging what size implant I'm going to use with regards to the absolute precision that we can give to our younger patients, or any of our ankle replacement patients for that matter, with regards to what Articulus Bio will be able to provide for us with regards to precision?
That's an excellent point, Dr. Osell. I've read papers that have studied ankle misalignments, ankle installation misalignments, and a 7-degree misalignment translates to a 50% decrease in survival rate, which so the human ankle under normal walking conditions experiences loads of around 5 times a patient's body weight, which is at least twice, if not more, than what's seen at the knee. And yet we're using all the same materials in all the same ways with even less contact area. So the stresses on those materials is much, much higher at the ankle than it is at the hip or knee. And if you get a little bit of misalignment on those very stressed materials, you're further concentrating that stress onto a small region of the plastic rather than spreading it out across the whole region of the plastic. Now, if the patient were to completely learn how to walk again and learn to tolerate that misalignment, of course they'd be abusing the heck out of their hip and knee, but they might be able to make the ankle last longer. Well, that never actually happens. People keep walking the same way, and if the ankle's not optimally aligned, they just walk right through that plastic bearing in no time. Ways we can avoid that is, well, the instrumentation that you have to use to align an ankle is, it's troublesome. Sinking alignment pins into the tibia near the knee and aiming on a fluoroscope for true neutral to align a foot that's, well, to match the alignment of a foot that's already badly compromised. And then you're using your imagination and your eyeballs and your fluoroscope to try to find what perpendicular looks like and compensating for Q angles and such things at the hip above it to try to get everything level and plumb. Well, again, we have better technological options. There are other companies that have rudimentary 3D printed alignment jigs to improve installation of total ankles. We're looking to take that a further step up by using the patient's bony anatomy to design repeatable bone jigs that help you make local cuts using local alignment features to then have repeatable outcomes that it takes care of the alignment for you. Also, it's worth saying that because this ankle joint floats, unlike other ankle joints that grind, it tolerates misalignments better. But we're not looking to create misalignments, we're looking to design out misalignments. The way that we're proposing that would be done is off of a CAT scan, designing geometry that basically snaps over existing bony prominences, has cutting guides built into it, and then ideally emailing 3D models of that geometry to the surgeon. So the surgeon can say, yes, I see how that can work, I see that that will work, I'm comfortable with this procedure. We don't, of course, believe that we can replace surgical skill. The total ankle replacements are an incredibly demanding procedure right now. Just like knees and hips were incredibly demanding procedures 15, 20 years ago, and now have benefited from significant engineering in creation of standardized cutting jigs. But ankles don't, ankles are too unique for a standardized approach to work. That's why we need to go custom to improve outcomes.
So Jerome, what I'm hearing from you is that you're going to have a custom fit to really allow the implant to fit the specific patient. And the other thing I guess I'm curious about, we've talked about a lot of different sort of aspects here. Sometimes in a case of a knee replacement, we'll see sort of torsional forces on a knee, and we'll see it loosen in the absence of polywear. And so I'm curious with your design, if there was a slight difference in rotation of the talar component with respect to the tibial component, how might your design be different than an existing design in regards to loosening through torsional stresses?
A great question, and I will do my best to answer that clearly for the people listening who can't see me waving my hands and don't have the benefit of looking at 3D printed models. So one way that total ankle joints are currently stabilized is by making the domed surfaces correspond to each other very tightly. So you've got a high degree of congruency between that polyethylene bearing and the talar dome component called the trochlea. So it's actually kind of a saddle shape, even more than a dome. And so when you get a rotation there currently, you have to ride up the surface of that saddle, and that blocks rotation. Now, blocking that rotation in that way also increases debris generation because you're increasing contact stresses. And to your question about loosening in the absence of debris, that means you're getting too much stress at the metal-bone interface. And so decreasing that is incredibly important. Now, if you're transmitting forces rotationally at the ankle by trying to ride one saddle-shaped object up another, you're still going to, well, one, you could grind the plastic, and two, you're still going to have torsion going into both bones. If you've got, imagine a suspension bridge here in multiple axes. Okay, that really didn't help anybody who's not seeing the models. If you've got a web, just think of the classic spider web shape, and you're pressing on the center and rotating that, you're going to have some give. You're going to, particularly if you've got a cone-shaped web, like marginally we do here, you can actually what's called distract the joint, or move the joint surfaces away from each other with that little bit of rotation. It's similar to what's being attempted at the in the current total ankle, but I would say we've got about 3 to 5 degrees of potential here in our joint before we generate any stresses. And then we're starting to generate stresses of lifting the body weight against gravity, which again is a manageable stress load for the body. The body is evolved to deal with gravitational loading. And so we're just working more within the body's natural constraints of standing against gravity to help alleviate metal bone shearing forces.
Jerome, thank you. I think that was excellent. I really appreciate your input.
Sounded great to me. I hope that other questions pop up that we can tackle and answer with regards to this this product. And again, thanks, Jerome, and thanks, Adam.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John?